Can you imagine not being allowed to attend a certain school because of your skin color? After World War II, African Americans began to demand more civil rights. The separate but equal laws were proving to be less and less adequate. Separate but equal. It was a standard established in 1896 in the case Plessy versus Ferguson. It basically stated if you had the same facility for whites and blacks, you were constitutional. So there were black schools and there were white schools. We can imagine the differences between the two. In 1953, the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, began its Fight for Freedom program, designed to remove racial discrimination within the next 10 years. The NAACP is still up and functioning. They began in 1953 with their fight focusing on discrimination in education. Their struggle began in law schools and worked its way down from there. In 1954, an African American man by the name of Oliver Brown tried to enroll his daughter Linda in a Topeka, Kansas school. That's a picture of the Browns. He was denied. Thurgood Marshall, who would go on to be the first African American Supreme Court justice, represented the Browns as the case went all the way to the Supreme Court. In the case, Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, the court ruled that they overturned their previous ruling. They ruled that separate but equal laws could not apply to education. Essentially, by separating the races, we were providing a disservice to children. Two ways. Number one, the schools were not equal. They were not the same, and it was causing a sense of inferiority between blacks and whites. A sense of inferiority from blacks compared to the white students. And the second way is that we were not preparing them for life. The reality was and still is that you have to work with different people of different cultures, of different ethnicities. And so we were setting them up to fail in life by not allowing them the opportunity to learn how to work with people of other colors. And the Supreme Court completely agreed with that. But the reality was, in spite of the Supreme Court ruling, in the South, particularly, schools were far from being integrated. The move to integrate education continued in 1957 when 9 African American students tried to enroll in Little Rock, Arkansas's Central High School. The governor of this state, Orville Faubus, right there, refused to allow them in and instead had police stop them from entering. Police stopped them from entering. President Eisenhower had no choice. He had to enforce what the Supreme Court had said. So President Eisenhower sends in the Arkansas National Guard and federal troops to ensure the students' rights to freedom of education. Now, there are some fascinating books out there about the Little Rock Nine. Many of the Little Rock Nine have written stories, their stories. It was a vicious time. One girl writes about constant death threats to her family. They were going to kill her grandmother, all because she wanted to go to school. The Civil Rights era is best known for helping Martin Luther King Jr. become a household name. He fought for many different people. But let's back up a little bit. The NAACP chose a woman by the name of Rosa Parks, hopefully her name sounds familiar, to be the hero and symbol of the civil rights movement. On December 1st, 1955, Parks refused to give up her seat on a Montgomery, Alabama bus. She was thrown in jail. With the help of Martin Luther King Jr., the African American citizens of Montgomery organized a boycott of the Montgomery bus system. After 381 days, so over a year of African Americans walking to and from work, walking to shopping centers, walking everywhere. And keep in mind, financially, what sort of people are going to own cars and what people are going to ride the bus. This was a very important clientele. The African American clientele was very important to the bus system, the public bus system. The Supreme Court, 381 days after Miss Parks refusing to give up her seat and the organization of the bus boycott, the Supreme Court struck down bus segregation laws. Now, Dr. King rose to power during this time by focusing on a nonviolent approach. He and Ralph Abernathy organized the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC, to coordinate activities among communities. The Civil Rights Act of 1957 was signed into law by President Eisenhower. It gave African Americans the right to vote with no exceptions.